Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dillard here to bring you the latest edition of National Sports, where I take you around the sports world here in Auburn, Alabama on WEGL 91.1 FM. This episode is going to be heavily influenced by the college football playoff rankings that were released Tuesday and some pretty quick topics. I think this show is actually all college football. So, just to jump right in, I'm going to go ahead and do my for and out, where I name the top four teams in, and then the next four teams out of what would be my rankings. First four teams, obviously, would go on to play in a college football playoffs. So, starting out, number one is Clemson. Clemson's a very good team, offensively and defensively. I think out of all the teams in college football, they're probably the most complete. I would make a case that Alabama is also another one of those teams, but a thing for Alabama is that their secondary always scares me about how easily they can get burned. Even last year when Auburn walked in, Auburn passed all over them, and Alabama will be a dominant top four team. Go to the playoffs, and their secondary can let them down on special occasions. The front seven, in my opinion, is the best front seven in college football, hands down. You can't argue with that, well, at least with me. But as far as their secondary goes, it's debatable as to whether they're top quality or not. Or not. They can have a good game here and then let their team down. So then, number two, I put Alabama. I think Clemson, Alabama, top two teams in the nation. I think, I know Alabama's not, people are saying they have that one loss to an Ole Miss team and that they should even be in the top five, really. But to me, you got to look at, who's a better team right now. Yeah, Alabama has that loss, but they're still a pretty good football team. And it's kind of hard to leave them out of a conversation. Like, if you were to name the top four teams, how's Alabama not in there? That's the question I ask. What other four teams do you think could show up Alabama and can beat them? And that list is very small. Number three, I have LSU, undefeated SEC team. Of course, Alabama and LSU play this weekend, so that's going to shake itself out. A lot of people, when the college football playoffs when the rankings came out on Tuesday, there were some people that were upset that both Alabama and LSU, two SEC teams, were in this ranking. And, it all goes back to the whole ESPN SEC network combination and how ESPN favored the SEC and, the whole SEC dominance thing. That, there's two SEC teams in the top four, and one of them has a loss, SEC bias. And it's like, LSU's undefeated. They've beaten some pretty they've been some pretty good quality teams, being Florida. And I feel as though it's hard to keep LSU out of the top four as well. They've played through a tough schedule, tougher than other teams in the top 10 have, and they have to play Alabama. Not only did you have to play Florida, not only you have to play Alabama, you're going to also have to play potentially an SEC championship game where whoever shows up out of the West is going to be pretty good, and it's going to look like we don't really know who's going to come out of the West right now, but it's pretty certain that I think it's Florida is going to come out of the West when they play Vanderbilt this weekend. So, it's pretty much Florida versus whoever at this point. So number four, I have Notre Dame. And earlier in the season, I talked about how I thought Notre Dame was ranked too high in the beginning because it goes back to the whole SEC thing. The two groups of people who always seem to be ranked high are SEC teams and then Notre Dame, because Notre Dame is like the the pinnacle of Notre Dame is the. I got a text from my dad telling me that I have birthday money in my account because Tuesday is my birthday. That totally just threw me off of what I was about to say. Um, Notre Dame, they're like the child of college football, you know. Uh, I thought they were ranked a little bit too high. They started having injuries, and then I joked about how their whole team would be on IR. But they've really bounced back. They do have the loss. It's to Clemson, so it's a really good loss, only by 2 points at Clemson. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's a really, really good loss, and it's hard not to put Notre Dame up in the top 4. I think in the actual rankings they're number 5, so it's not like it's a long shot that I put them at 4. So my first 4 in: Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Notre Dame, 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order. So if you're wondering where Ohio State is at, they're at number 5. And Ohio State's just a interesting case because they're your defending champions. That is correct. They're undefeated. That is also correct. But their schedule, they haven't really played top teams yet, which will fix itself because their schedule is backloaded. You know, they have to play Michigan State, and they're going to play Michigan, and they're going to play a Big Ten championship game. So that's going to work itself out. You know, the whole year, I've always wondered why Ohio State is still number 1 in the AP rankings when they don't really play anybody. And eventually, there has to be a team that you think is better than Ohio State. So about week 5, 6, I was like, you know what? I don't think Ohio State should be number 1 anymore. And, you know, but last Sunday when the AP rankings came out and Ohio State was still number 1, I'm just thinking, man, I was expecting them to get jumped for at least the past 3 weeks. So when the College Football Committee rankings came out and they were 3rd, then, you know, I was pretty pleased about that. I don't think they're the number 1 team. I don't care if you are the defending national champions or not. It's about this year. You know, it is about this year and what's happening right now. And right now, you don't look like a number 1 team in the nation. You look like a top 5 team. That's not bad because there's still plenty of football to go. There's still your championship game. Even if you're sitting at number 5, anybody in the top 10 right now shouldn't be worried about where they're at. If you're in the top 10, you're in good position because we all know those rivalry games at the end of the season are going to decide what goes down, and you're going to fall into a good place if you just keep winning. You know, if you're in the top 10, all you should be worried about is just winning football games from here on out. You know? So, for Ohio State, I wouldn't worry. Whether you're number 3 or number 5, even number 10, you shouldn't worry because you're going to play a couple good teams. You're going to jump up in the rankings. Other teams will lose. You're going to have your conference championship. You're going to go in there. You do your thing. You get it done. You win. You'll be okay. You'll be in the top 4. Don't worry about what's going to happen this week. Don't worry about your ranking this week. Number 6, I have Michigan State, who I've been solidly behind this year. I feel as though Michigan State was a contender for a national championship very early in the season, and they've struggled in the past couple of weeks. They didn't struggle last week when they played Indiana. It was close, but they pulled away pretty well. Michigan State's had a couple of injuries. I know injury on offensive line. The running backs have been banged up. Michigan State does still have to play Ohio State, which I believe is 2 weeks from Saturday, the 21st. I think if I have that correct. The 21st. Tomorrow, Sunday the 7th. Saturday the 7th. Yeah, they're playing the 21st against Ohio State. They're playing at Ohio State. So that's gonna be a game pretty much to decide what's gonna happen in the Big Ten. You know, Michigan has that loss in Michigan State. We all know what happened with that. And then, you know, Michigan also has to play Ohio State. So you could possibly see Ohio State and Michigan State getting a loss if Ohio State beats Michigan State, but then Ohio State loses to Michigan. And it gets, you know, it starts to get a little messy up in the Big Ten. Number 7, I have finally Baylor. Last week I had Baylor at 1. And then their quarterback got hurt. And then I thought about it, and it's like, well, and by the way, the Baylor played last night, and the backup actually did pretty well. He had about over 300 yards, scored a couple of touchdowns. But then one thing that concerned me was their defense. They were up 31-10 against Kansas State, and Kansas State was able to mount a comeback. And with 4 minutes to go, they threw an interception. They had a wide receiver. They tried to do a trick play. Wide receiver threw the ball, interception, and that was pretty much the game. But that defense, you're winning 31-10 fourth quarter, and you let that team come back. You can't do that. You absolutely can't do that. And then Baylor didn't score 40 or more points, which I thought was weird because either Kansas State played really good defense, which Baylor's backup quarterback played well, but you only scored 31 points, where with Baylor, I'm used to seeing like 60, 70 points on the board. So it's good that Baylor's still in stride, but if you ask me, could Baylor beat any of those top 6 teams now with their quarterback out, even though their backup freshman's playing well? I don't know, because as a freshman, you're gonna get in situations against these top teams that if you get hit a little bit, you may start to panic. He played against Kansas State, and that's not a knock against Kansas State, but when Baylor has to go play TCU or Oklahoma State, and they all eventually play in some capacity one another. I think Baylor's not playing one of those teams. But if you have to play TCU, they're going to play TCU. When you go play TCU, he's going to be in a whole different environment. That's going to be a whole different situation. TCU's going to put up points. He's going to have to try to match them, and he's going to try to force some things, try to get points on the board to keep up, and it just may cost him the game. So we're going to see where that's going to take Baylor. Just because you're at number 7 is not a bad thing. But I felt like after the quarterback got hurt, that really hurt their draft stock. That really just hurt their ranking a little bit, because you have that freshman quarterback who's going to do well. He's in an offensive driven system. They were going to sit him down. They were going to program it into his head to do this, and he was going to play well. And they had control of him, but that defense still, it's going to come back to him. And then finally, number 8, I put Iowa up there. I think they've played some pretty solid football. Their defense is playing really good. They're kind of out of all the teams in the top 8 is Iowa that I don't know the most about. But, the Hawkeyes, they're going to keep playing. They slowly inched their way up. I'm pretty sure they weren't even ranked at the beginning of the season. It kind of reminds me in 2010 when Auburn, started out and they weren't ranked, but they inched their way up. And you could possibly see Iowa doing that. It's not over yet. You still got a couple games to play. You can't get ahead of yourself. But, start to see Iowa, they're going to start slowly inching their way up. And, they're going to get where they want to get eventually. As long as you just got to keep winning. You just got to just keep going, keep winning, and you'll get where you want to go to. That's going to do it for this block. When we come back, I'm going to run down some questions that I've heard people say around the We Go Eagle Eye offices, and I'm going to address those questions dealing with college football. So you listen to National Sports here on WEGL 91.1 FM.
I'm Anthony Anderson, and I know you love your family, but are you taking care of their future? If you can buy a latte, you can buy life insurance. It's that affordable. Learn more at lifehappens.org.
A public service message from the nonprofit Life Happens.
How can we make Alabama a more beautiful state? By keeping our roads, highways, schools, and communities litter-free. It doesn't take much, but to think before you act. So what does the next generation say?
Pick it up, man.
Take pride in your school. Did you just litter? Clean it up, dude.
How can you make a difference? Adopt a mile. Join the Alabama Clean Campus program, or join in the Spring Cleanup or Alabama Coastal Cleanup. And remember,
Don't drop it on Alabama.
This message by People Against a Littered State, the ABA, ALDOT, and this station.
And welcome back to National Sports here on WEGL 91.1 FM. I'm your host, Jared Dillard. I got an update on my phone from Bleacher Report, an article that I got from the NFL website that reported Chuck Pagano was forced into lineup decisions the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. And I got that because I'm a Colts fan, and I get all the news from the Colts. And I just thought it was interesting to point out that, Chuck Pagano's in a pretty tough situation in Indianapolis. And this brings up, I'm able to talk about AU Nation on Eagle Eye TV, new sports show, if you want to go check it out, that actually had, one of the topics was which head coach needs to be fired ASAP in the NFL. And none of them said Chuck Pagano. I think two of the analysts said the Lions, but the analysts are from WEGL, Eagle Eye TV, and The Plainsman. It's a really good show. It's every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. The first episode's already up there, so if you want to go check it out, that would be great. But going on to the topics I wanted to get to, before I'm losing track of the day already. Going to the topics I want to talk about, I was talking about before the break. So, a lot of people, when the rankings came out, a lot of people was wondering why Baylor and TCU aren't in the top 4. And it's going back to our conversation that I had a couple of weeks ago, where it's like, defense means so much in college football, I feel like. I've always had the mentality. Excuse me. I've always had the mentality that defense wins championships. That's just what I've known. Ever since I've been playing football, watching football. And Baylor and TCU don't have a solid defense. To me, out of those two, Baylor has a better defense than TCU. I think eventually TCU's just going to lose it because they're on the brink. I feel TCU is on the brink of just collapsing because of that defense. I know they're undefeated. They have a tough game this weekend, and I'm going to get to the game picks later, but I think this is going to be it for TCU. But with Baylor, they have a little bit of a defense, but it's not good enough. It's like a shootout. It's like a shootout. You can score, trade scores back and forth, but it takes one mistake by your offense, and we're all human, so you're going to make mistakes. Mistakes are just the name of the game in football. You're going to make a mistake. So it's pretty much a foot race, and whoever trips first is going to lose. And you shouldn't try to win football games like that. And I know Baylor's not trying to win a football game through a shootout. Their offense is really good. I'll give them that. They have one of the, if not the best offenses in college football. But you don't want to try to win a shootout every game because you're going to meet that team that can keep up with you. And then when you run into a situation like your quarterback being injured and you have to bring in a freshman who is still good, even with a backup quarterback, Baylor is still a good football team. They're still great. They're still top 10 caliber. But because he's getting to the rhythm of playing these games, and he has to play high-pressure games, with not many games played under his belt, he is going to make mistakes. He's going to read the defense wrong, fumble a snap, just make errant throws. It's going to happen. It happens to the best quarterbacks. And if you have that happen, the shootout gets harder to win. And eventually, it's going to get to you. And that's why I wouldn't put Baylor and TCU in the top 4. I also wouldn't put them in the top 4 because if you look at it, take Baylor and TCU. I can name at least 5 teams that can beat Baylor and TCU. You have to think if Baylor and TCU, or let's just go with TCU. If you put TCU in the top 4, say at number 4, that means that you think only 3 teams are better than TCU. TCU is that 4th team. That means that you don't, out of every team in college football, you don't think 3 teams are better than Baylor and TCU. I think Alabama, Clemson, LSU, and then Notre Dame are better than TCU and Baylor. That should automatically push them out of the top 4. I know they're undefeated. But when you play a schedule like they do, like if you were watching when they were releasing the rankings and they were down to the last couple of teams, and they pulled up that graphic and it had Alabama, Baylor, and then Ohio State was there. And you saw the records. So Alabama 7-1, Baylor, Ohio State 8-0. Okay, Alabama has that one loss. That should hurt them, right? But then there was another number, and it said strength of schedule. Alabama was 3rd in the nation in strength of schedule. You know where Baylor is at? Baylor was 100 spots back at 103rd. And then Ohio State was in the 70s somewhere. And strength of schedule is so important when it comes to college football. Even people on the committee were talking about when I saw a quote about Clemson, and it was because of the quality of teams they played and the way they won. That's the reason why they're number 1. Baylor, it's impressive you're 8-0. TCU as well. It's impressive that you're 8-0, but it's less impressive if you're 103rd out of around 135 teams in college football. You are in the very back end of the bus of college football when it comes to strength of schedule. If you're playing the 3rd hardest schedule in the nation right now and only have 1 loss, you're 7-1. That's more impressive than being undefeated playing, smaller, not so good schools. Alabama's schedule and record is a lot more impressive than Baylor's schedule and record. The way Baylor has won is impressive. The fact that he can put up 70, 80 points at a snap of a finger, just like that, that's impressive. But you have to remember, although that's impressive, look at who you're playing. Baylor, it's impressive you put up 80 points, but because you did it to Northwest Florida State College of the Blind, that doesn't really mean much, So that's why I'm not upset at Baylor and TCU being not being in the top 4. They shouldn't be. Based on that doesn't make any sense. The good thing about Baylor and TCU is that they shouldn't worry about not being in the top 4. I know they got the short end of the stick last year when those rankings came out, and they weren't in there. I understand that. And you know what? If they're probably thinking that right now. This is carbon copy last year all over again. But you have to just keep thinking, if I win out, and the Big 12 has good teams. They have Baylor, TCU. They have Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. You have good teams. The thing about the Big 12, all those good teams play each other at the end of the year. Another thing about the Big 12 is that they don't have a championship game either. So when the season ends at 12 games, that's it for the Big 12. Whoever's on top of the standings, they get the championship, and they call it that. That's also why I think if the Big 12 really was upset at not being included in the championship game, then if the Big 12 was upset that a team from their conference did not get into the college football playoffs, they need to think about having a conference championship. Because and I'll go into it later, it will set up something that I think should happen. And B, having that conference championship game automatically pits you against another really good school to elevate your stock. Alabama, for instance, let's take Alabama. Say they win out, they go to the SEC championship. Say Baylor wins out, they win their championship. Baylor's 12-0, Alabama's 11-1, and they're probably neck and neck still in the rankings. Well, Alabama has a conference championship, game. They play one more game. That's one more game on Alabama's resume to look good. And 9 times out of 10 in a conference championship game, you're going to play a pretty good school. So, for instance, Alabama's going to go play Florida. So, say Baylor is number 4 and Alabama's number 5. And then Alabama goes plays against Florida, who most likely will be around the top 15 still. They'll be in the top 15. That win against Florida is going to jump Alabama over Baylor. But if Baylor was to have a conference championship game, let's say they split it in half and they played a conference championship game against Oklahoma State, and Baylor beat Oklahoma State the same week Alabama beat Florida, then it kind of evens itself out. But Alabama has that advantage because they have a championship game. They have that extra game. And that's what the Big 12 needs to start thinking about. You know, you got to get the schools together and just say, hey, I want this to happen. And I don't think it's that simple. I mean, what do I know? I'm a sophomore at Auburn University. But you start thinking about what it's going to take to elevate our my division stock, and that's it. Have a championship game like all the other conferences do. You know? And schedule some better teams at a conference. That all-conference schedule should be a little bit tougher, you know? You see a lot of teams lately, their first game of the season, they'll go play a another Power 5 school that's really good. Alabama with Wisconsin this year, Auburn with Louisville. Well, Louisville was a good team. I'm not sure what's going on this year. I think Alabama's playing USC now. If I read that story correctly, a couple of weeks ago I saw. Alabama, USC. Just things like that. Even Florida plays Florida State at the end of every year. That's a rivalry, so of course they're gonna play each other. But I mean, that's an out of conference game. That's really high profile. Those are games that you got to schedule if you want to look good. That goes for the other conferences as well that are not in the Power 5. Just schedule those tougher games. The worst thing that happens is that you lose to them. If you lose to the top 5 team in the nation, that's not really going to hurt you that much. I mean, they're top 5 for a reason, correct? Well, when we come back to National Sports here on WEGO Radio, I'm going to explain why Alabama should be in the top 4 because my good friend Noah Gardner thinks they shouldn't. I'm going to explain why they should. And I'm going to also explain how I would set up the college football playoffs if I had the power to change it. Listen to National Sports here on WEGO 91.1 FM.
Can you tell if these vegetables are being contaminated with bacteria that could cause paralysis? Listen, you can't see it either. Use different cutting boards so that the bacteria in raw meats and seafood and their juices doesn't touch prep surfaces for other foods like veggies. Raw food may contain bacteria that can make you very sick, or worse. Roughly 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year, but you can keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov. Brought to you by the USDA, HHS, and the Ad Council.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. I feel like I'm choking. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
You know how to react to their asthma attacks. Here's how to prevent them. Call 1-866-NO-ATTACKS. Visit www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA and the Ad Council.
I'm so glad we left that stupid party.
No joke.
Hey, baby, are you an overdue library book? Because you got fine written all over you. Oh, barf.
What about that girl with the hoop earrings?
Ridiculous. When she was dancing...
Megan, look out! Look out!
Oh, my God, Becky. Becky, are you okay?
My arm. I think it's broken.
Can you bend it?
It's already bent. In the wrong direction.
I can't believe this. I'm so sorry. I only had a few drinks. I was just buzzed.
Really? Just buzzed?
Yeah, I swear.
Well, in that case, my arm is fine. Ah, that's better.
You're really okay? You're serious, Becky?
No, genius. I'm not serious.
Ow! My arm, it hurts.
Buzzed driving. Maybe we should stop acting like it's no big deal. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Ad Council, and this station.
And welcome back to WEGL 91.1 FM. You're listening to National Sports here with me, Jared Dillard. I know you're excited about that. Going back to college football. You're probably sick of it already. But let's talk about Alabama. Yeah, that's taboo around here. I understand that. Alabama is in the top 4 for a reason. And it's because of their defense. It is because of their offense. It's because they're well-rounded. And it's because of the people they played. It's because of their schedule and how they win. A lot of people wonder why Alabama is ranked ahead of certain teams like Baylor, TCU, why they're ranked in front of, people ask why they're ranked in front of Ole Miss when Ole Miss beat them. And people ask why they're ranked in front of Florida and other schools. You know, in my rankings, I have them at 2, with the only other team being Clemson, who I think is one of the only handful of teams that could actually take on Alabama and actually, come away with a win. I'm going to explain why Alabama is a top team. I don't hate Alabama. I may not like how. Okay, I'll put it this way. I don't hate Alabama's football team. I don't hate Nick Saban. I don't hate their players. Just some of their fans rile me a little bit. Some of the things they do. Some of the things they do is either just straight up ignorant or it's just annoying. And most of them are fine. Most of them are respectable people. But some of them, I'm pretty sure you can say that about any fan base. But I don't hate Alabama. They have a good quarterback in Coker. I think he's solid. Is he amazing? Is he Heisman worthy? I don't think so. But he's a solid quarterback you can win with. When you think about it, Alabama's quarterbacks have never had to. They're game managers. They don't have to be all-stars like other team quarterbacks. Jake Coker doesn't have to be a Trevon Boykin in order for Alabama to win a national championship. He just has to be able to make smart decisions, manage the offense, and just keep the drive going. That's all he has to do. Alabama's bread and butter is their running backs in the way they can just run straight through anybody. That's Alabama's bread and butter when it comes to offense. It doesn't revolve around the quarterback. I mean, obviously, offenses revolve around the quarterback, but that running back for Alabama is so vital. Now, Alabama has changed in the past couple of years to where they're a little bit more heavy on the passing than they used to be. But I just think that's just a change in the evolution of the game. The NFL you see is becoming a passing league, and college football has always been ground game. There's been a lot of teams that still rely on the ground game. I mean, look at Georgia Tech; they're still running the triple option over there. And Navy. I'm not sure what kind of offense Navy runs, but they run the ball a lot. Navy's a really good team. And for me, I feel as though Alabama is changing a little bit, and for that reason, they're keeping up with what's going on. They're relying more on that pass. They're putting more on their quarterback and less on their running back, so the running back can breathe. They're being more balanced. With their defense, and I said it earlier, their secondary always scares me. My dad is an Alabama fan, and we always talk about their secondary. Their secondary is probably the weakest part of that whole team. Now, their secondary is good, but they're inconsistent. They let up too many yards to teams with average quarterbacks. If we go back to the Georgia game, for example, in the Georgia game, because Georgia relied on their running game and then Chubb went out, they had to resort back to the quarterback who wasn't very experienced, and Georgia was not able to do anything because they lost their running game, and so their passing game wasn't up to snuff. Their quarterback wasn't ready for it, and their defense was just too good, which brings me to their front seven, which I will debate endlessly is the best front seven in college football. Hands down. Alabama has the best front seven in college football. And that is the reason why they can stay in games for so long, even if their offense is struggling. The moment Chubb went down that Georgia game, Alabama's defense was just ferocious against that quarterback. Whether it was Lambert in there or the backup, they were ferocious. They were going to go after him. Granted, the game was wet, it was muddy, it was a sloppy game for Georgia. But Alabama saw red, and they just went after him. That's going back to Baylor's thing. Baylor lost their quarterback. If Baylor and Alabama were to meet, and Baylor had that freshman quarterback, they put him in against Alabama, who has a weak secondary, but that front seven is so strong, I would be concerned about my quarterback's mental health because that front seven is going to be after him all day, every day. And for Baylor to win that game against Alabama, their defense is going to have to make some stops to help that quarterback out. But that's why Alabama deserves to be in the top four. They are, beside Clemson, the other complete team to me. You know, every team has their weakness, but Clemson, Alabama, and I want to say LSU, Notre Dame, my top four, they're the complete teams, I think. LSU, their quarterback, I was worried if he could throw the ball. He proved me wrong. He can. In the Notre Dame, when all the injuries started happening, I was just thinking it's going to be that year where just luck is just not on their side, and it was just not going to go well for them. And, you know, they bounced back. You know, they put in their backup quarterback. He's played well. He's played exceptionally well. You know, Golson left. You know, he's out doing his thing over in Florida State. And Notre Dame has kept with the stride. That's impressive. Now, for like Ohio State, Michigan State, Baylor, Iowa, and then if you want to know what 9 and 10 are in my top, you know, my 4 and out, I had Florida at 9, TCU at 10. And that's where TCU ended up. They ended up all the way at 10. So Ohio State, Michigan State, Baylor, Iowa, Florida, TCU, I can name at least one thing about all those teams that I just think is going to cost them a game. For Ohio State, it's going to be their inconsistent offense. For Michigan State, it's just going to be their uncertainty with how they want to run their offense. You know, for Michigan State, for some reason, for like a span of 5 to 10 minutes, their offense sputters. And they don't know if they want to put it on Connor Cook, if they want to put it on the running back, whoever it may be, because there's probably going to be more injuries, you know, for that running back squad. Their defense keeps them in the game, though. Michigan State has to work on how they want the offense to operate. Baylor's defense, by far, is going to be their problem. For Iowa, it's just going to be playing with a leveled head because you're getting up in the rankings that you're usually not used to being up there that high, and you don't want to be inconsistent. Iowa, if I had to pick a 15 to be well-rounded, it would be Iowa. I mean, even though they're all the way back at 8th, I would pick Iowa. I think they're pretty well-rounded, but I want to see them play tougher competition to really see, you know, where they're gonna fall, you know. But Florida, obviously, quarterback issues. You know, Will Grier is out for the season, drug testing, and the TCU, obviously, defense. So I'm now gonna explain how I would set up my college football playoff rankings. So first, I would expand it to 8 teams, which I would be against with because I feel like expanding, this is a whole different conversation, but I feel like extending the amount of games these teams have to play while the NCAA rakes in all this money and these players are still getting, hit with these fines and being suspended for signing jerseys or getting a free meal from a place or getting a haircut, for free. I just think that's ridiculous, When what was it? Todd Gurley got in trouble for selling his jersey. I think that's what it was. And, he got in trouble for it. I just think that's crazy because the NCAA is making all this money off his jersey sales. He can't even make a quick, $50. I think that's just sad, actually. You can be a college football player, walk through a store, you see all these jerseys with your name on it, and you're not gaining a single penny from these sales. Yeah, you can make the argument they get free education. You can make the argument they're taken care of. But how can somebody use your likeness on whatever they want? And people could care less about what you get in return. That's my argument on that. But anyway, that'll be for another day. But I'll expand it to 8 teams. 5 conference champions and 3 wild cards. This goes back to my Big 12 rant from earlier where I said they need to have a championship game. They really should if they want to sort this out. They have a conference champion, but having that extra game on there would really help when it comes to college football rankings. So I would have 5 teams for the conferences, they're champions, at 3 wild cards. So obviously teams that weren't champions, but they still had a good enough resume to be in the top 8. Because 9 times out of 10, those 5 conference champions were at least in the top 10. I won't say top 8 because that may be a little far-fetched. And then that's actually something I'd even look at. Maybe I should go back to last year, and I don't have my computer with me, but I should go back to last year and look at all the conference champions and where they ended the year at after the conference championship game to see if they actually were in the top 8. That's actually really interesting to look at. So I have my 5 conference champions, 3 wild cards, and then I would set up the seeding 1 to 8, and then the next seeding is 3 to 6. So the winner of 1 to 8 and 3 to 6 will play each other, and then the winner of 4 to 5 and 2 to 7 will play each other, and it'll go on from there. And all the games will be in January, back to back to back, and take you to the championship game. And that's the way I would set it up. I don't like expanding it to 8 teams because of the reason of they're playing more games. I think they're college students, But I think that would be the most fair way to do it. Because when you think about Memphis and Houston and Toledo, who lost, so Toledo's probably out of that conversation now. But when we think about Memphis, who's number 13, and Houston, who's 25, they have to play each other, by the way, so that's going to work itself out anyway. But let's say Memphis is at 13. When you think about Memphis, it's pretty much guaranteed that they're not going to be in the top 8 or top 4 by the time this is all over. It's pretty much guaranteed. Unless something wild happens. And college football is wild, so it could happen. But something pretty bad has to happen to the top 10 teams, each one of them, for Memphis to be considered. You're not in the Power 5. You don't play a lot of tough teams. You can start scheduling some tough out-of-conference games like Ole Miss, like Memphis is doing. But because it's 4 teams, because of the division you play in, it's not going to mean much. I mean, I guess the next logical explanation is just to move conferences, but that's a lot harder than it sounds to do. So we're going to commercial break. Listen to National Sports here on WEGO 91.1 FM.
The thought of my sons growing up without me inspired me to quit smoking.
I talked to my doctors, and then I threw away all my cigarettes, ashtrays, and lighters.
I started exercising instead of smoking.
Staying away from alcohol when I was first quitting was key.
I kept on trying, learned something each time.
Do whatever it takes.
No matter how many times it takes.
We did it, so can you.
For free help, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and CDC.
Soon this little baby I'm singing to sleep will start to walk. Before I know it, I'll be dropping her off at school, beaming when she walks up to accept her diploma, or holding back tears as she takes those big steps down the aisle. But before she takes all those steps, she and thousands like her will need you to take yours. Join March for Babies to help make her steps possible. Start your team today at marchforbabies.org.
Well, here we are again, and I got to tell you, Jim, this match has me really concerned.
That's right, Ron. In one corner, we have a powerful heavyweight, a train, weighing in at a whopping 6,000 tons. And in the other, this hasty lightweight challenger, a car, at just 1.5 tons.
This does not bode well for the car or the people in it.
Ron, this is one of those rare moments where I actually find myself at a loss for words.
This driver can't think he can beat a train.
I can hardly bear to watch.
It's no contest. Every day, people are injured or killed trying to beat a train at rail crossings. Trying to beat a train is more dangerous than you think. See Tracks, Think Train. For more safety tips and information, visit ctracksthinktrain.org.
Welcome back to National Sports here on WEGL 91.1 FM. I'm your host, Jared Dillard. During the break, I had got an update on my phone that Deadspin published an article about Greg Hardy, and they've released photos from a domestic violence situation he had with his girlfriend. It was 48 photos, and they were, that was actually pretty tough to look at. And Greg Hardy, if you don't, he's a defensive player, a defensive lineman for the Dallas Cowboys, and you probably recently saw him for having a meltdown on the sidelines with a wide receiver, Des Bryant. And I just thought it was important to bring up, just these athletes, you want them to be role models. They have the life, they have money, they have fame, friends, Yet athletes could do horrible things, And just looking at that was disgusting. And I would not wish that upon anybody that I know, no matter what they've done to me. So, we're going to pick up with college football again. Going to the game picks for this week. I had a couple of game picks. A lot of these were pretty simple to make. Some of these were not. And I have one upset that I think will probably happen. So, with 10 minutes to go, first, Duke at North Carolina, 11 a.m. All these times I have here are Central Standard Time. If you live in the Eastern Time Zone, like I do, then just add an hour, So, Duke at North Carolina, 11 a.m. in North Carolina. Duke, obviously coming off that tragic ending with Miami, at least in the end. I mean, the officials got suspended. I don't know if that makes them feel better or not, but Duke sitting at 6-2, North Carolina 7-1. After North Carolina had the loss to South Carolina in the beginning of the year, you were thinking, okay, North Carolina is just going to be North Carolina. And now it's looking like a Clemson-North Carolina matchup in the ACC championship game. Who would have thought about that? For this game, I'm going to take North Carolina. I think Ron LaVoy is going to be pretty happy about that. For the next game, number 5, Notre Dame at Pittsburgh. This one was interesting because I flip-flopped on this one because last night I was like Notre Dame. This morning I woke up, I was like, I'm actually feeling Pittsburgh. And now I'm like Notre Dame. I'm going to pick Notre Dame, but I don't feel really confident about it. I don't know why. I hyped up Notre Dame so much in the beginning of the show, and now I don't feel very confident about it. And I don't know if because they're playing at Pittsburgh, it's because Pittsburgh is actually a pretty decent team. Is it because I just think Notre Dame's just going to fall off the rock? I don't know. But I'm picking Notre Dame. The next one I really don't feel comfortable about is number 1 Clemson versus number 16 Florida State. Florida State's at Clemson. Florida State lost a heartbreaker to Georgia Tech on another unbelievable play. So Florida State's sitting at 16. They're a good team. I'm not sure if Golston will be back for the game. I haven't really read up on it. And Clemson, well-rounded. It did trouble me to how much points they led up against NC State. Don't get me wrong, NC State is actually a pretty good team. But it does concern me because Florida State was able to put up points pretty fast on a Syracuse team last week. And I think Dalvin Cook is back. I'm not even sure. I don't know anything about Florida State right now. I've just not been reading up on them since that Georgia Tech loss. But I feel like if Florida State was to win this game somehow, it wouldn't really be an upset. I know, number 16, if a number 1 team loses to a team outside the top 10, it technically, I guess, is an upset. But I feel like Florida State, Clemson, I feel like it can go either way. So I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm throwing away a pick here. I'm going to pick Florida State. I think college football, it's been crazy the past couple of weeks. Number 1 losing at home, who just got there for the first time since, I think this is 88. Yeah, chalk that up for crazy. Next game is number 8 TCU at number 14 Oklahoma State at 2:30. The Florida State game is also at 2:30. I'm picking Oklahoma State. And it's because I just don't trust TCU anymore. Will TCU win the game? Probably. Will it be a shootout? Most definitely. But I think Oklahoma State's going to make that one stop that's going to end TCU. And I think this is it. This is TCU's this is it for them. Their last 4 games are tough. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but it's Oklahoma State, then they play some other team. Then it's, I think, Oklahoma and then Baylor. They're going to lose one of those games. There's no way TCU goes undefeated this year. No way. Navy at Memphis at 6 o'clock. I'm picking Navy. This is probably another throwaway pick. But, Navy only has 1 loss, I'm pretty sure. And Memphis has played well. You know what? Rewind. Navy at Memphis. Number 13 Memphis. 6 o'clock. I'm picking Memphis. I just don't. I'm undecided really on this game. Memphis plays very well. I think they're a really good team. But the Navy gives trouble to everybody. Navy could probably go play Clemson right now and make trouble for them. So I'll pick Memphis. I'll pick Memphis on this one. Utah at Washington. Number 12 Utah at Washington. 6:30. It's interesting because Washington's favored. And I'm not really sure why. I wonder why USC was favored against Utah, and then USC pretty much blew Utah out. But now Washington is favored. And I think USC is a better team than Washington. I'm going to pick Utah in this game. Penn State at Northwestern, 11 a.m. I'm picking Penn State. Number 21 Northwestern, by the way. But I'm going to pick Penn State. I don't understand what's going on with Northwestern's rankings. But I always think, I think this year they've been ranked too high. They have that win against Stanford. But that wins against top teams earlier in the season don't really mean much to me, I guess, in a sense, because college football doesn't have a preseason, Stanford came out and stumbled against Northwestern. Northwestern able to get the win. But then Stanford has gotten better throughout the year, and then Northwestern's kind of regressed a little bit. I don't think they'll beat Penn State. So I'm going to take Penn State. Arkansas at Ole Miss, 2:30 p.m. I picked this game because Arkansas plays everybody pretty tough. And they're playing Ole Miss, who controls their own destiny for the SEC. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick Arkansas in this game. Not Arkansas, I'm picking... Evan, you messed me up. I was making game picks, and then I was going to go pick Ole Miss, and then I ended up picking Arkansas. Yeah, it is on you. Your mic wasn't even on.
Whatever, man.
So, anyway, I'm going to pick Ole Miss to beat Arkansas. Cincinnati at number 25 Houston. That's a 2:30 game. I'm going to pick Houston, even though I think Cincinnati will put up a fight in this game. Number 7 Michigan State at Nebraska at 6 o'clock. For some reason, Michigan State's only favored by a touchdown to a 3-6 Nebraska team. I don't like Nebraska anyway, so I'm just going to pick Michigan State. Oh, here we go. Auburn at number 19 Texas A&M at 6:30. I have no hope in Auburn. I'm sorry. 4-4. It's not going to look good for the rest of the year. Hopefully, of course, I hope they pull out the victory, but I'm just going to pick Texas A&M. I like their new quarterback. I don't know his name, but I like him. Number 2 LSU at number 4 Alabama. That's a 7 o'clock game. Like I said, Alabama, the best front seven in college football. I'm going to pick Alabama to win this one. Will Leonard Fournette have more than 100 yards? Yes, but he won't have more than 130. So I'll pick Alabama to win that one. And then my last game, Minnesota at number 3 Ohio State. That's a 7 o'clock game. Get ready for this one because I think Minnesota plays everybody pretty tough. JT Barrett's not going to play in this game because obviously he's suspended. Cardell Jones is going to play. I'm going to pick Minnesota to beat Ohio State this weekend. 7 o'clock prime time. Because Minnesota played Michigan last week, and they played pretty tough all the way to the end. They're going to still be riding that wave of intensity after Coach Kill retired. So let's see if the Golden Gophers can pull out the upset. This has been National Sports on WEGL 91.1 FM. I'm your host, Jared Dillard. See you at the same time next week.